Hello, my lovely soul, and welcome to Unstoppable Confidence. I am your host, Lauren Glick. I am here to bring you my energy, my motivational speaking, and me being a confidence mentor. My mission is to inspire women to own who they are, step into their higher selves fearlessly, and live a life with unstoppable joy. On this show, we are going to cover everything from aligning your life to your higher self, setting boundaries, self-growth, and living a purpose-driven life. Let's get you living a meaningful life you cannot wait to wake up to. Stop driving and start living with ease and abundance. Cheers to living a magical life. And I am so grateful to be on this journey with you. Now, let's head into today's episode. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for joining me on Bullhorn here. And for the listeners, thank you for joining in. We are on another episode of Unstoppable Confidence podcast, where I absolutely love to bring inspiring men and women and talk about their story. How they are going through, they're overcoming things, how we're moving into new business adventures. And today, Marcus is an author, and his book is on overcoming social anxiety and how he was able to do that as well, to bring you the tips and tricks to do that yourself. And as we were talking before, yeah, I definitely did have a little bit of social anxiety, and he said something very interesting that I was kind of shocked about as well. So, Marcus, I would love for you to introduce yourself and the title of your book, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me on the show. Like you mentioned, I'm not only an author, I'm also a professional speaker. I have been for the last 10 years now. And my new book is called Don't Shut Up. And it's a collection of my own stories and personal experiences growing up as a socially anxious kid, and then eventually overcoming my social anxiety and actually becoming a professional speaker. So it lays out all of the tips and tricks that I used, all of my kind of growing moments and pain points to help readers understand that they're not alone in this struggle. And there's millions of people that feel the same fear that they do. And there's a pathway out. And you can overcome your social anxiety to a degree where you can live a better, happier life.
I love that. And it's a good time for that as well. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, so COVID kind of just lifted all the crazy requirements they were having, and getting back into reality of seeing people in person. It's a good time to be talking about social anxiety and how to being able to handle different circumstances and situations. So on that, Marcus, I think the one thing that you said that I really did enjoy was, you don't ever really get over it. You just have, or correct me if I'm wrong, right? It's just ways that you're able to deal with this certain situations.
Absolutely. And, you can overcome it to certain degrees, but it never completely goes away. Even though I've been doing this for so long, I still get nervous before I step on stage. I still get nervous when I introduce myself to someone that I'm really excited to meet. I think that fear is a universal among all people. We want to feel accepted, we want to feel confident in ourselves, and that never really goes away. But you can find ways to overcome that and to channel those kind of feelings of anxiousness into a constructive direction instead of a destructive direction. So, too often we have those endorphins that rush through our bodies that we often call social anxiety or stage fright, and we
Gotcha.
let them manifest as negative traits. when really you can choose to put that energy, which is really what it is. It's a surge of adrenaline, norepinephrine, and a whole bunch of other hormones that can either pump you up or bring you down. It's the same feeling of going on a roller coaster or going through something really traumatic. Both experiences can release the same hormones, but they're experienced in a different way. So when you start
Mm.
to reframe those situations in a positive light and educate yourself on how that response is actually beneficial, you can redirect that energy in a positive direction into your presentation or into that conversation.
I love that, Marcus, because I talk about that as well. And I use the examples of when I was a city firefighter because running into a burning building, you do get like a crazy, I mean, obviously for good reasons, like your life is at danger. And being able to ground your energy because your brain can go on overdrive and you can use that energy in a destructive manner. And this is probably where I learned to start, at least to be in control of my thought patterns of you can use that energy in a good way and use that extra epinephrine or what adrenaline, excuse me, use that extra adrenaline and ground yourself within that moment and use that for positives, and understand that, what situation you're going into, make sure that you are educated in that situation, but also just the knowing of your own knowledge and grounding yourself in those crazy times. um I do love to talk about that as well. So it's interesting that you mentioned it just being energy and we're able to use it in a positive or negative
Yeah,
effect.
absolutely. I love your example of kind of that same feeling about when you're about to run into a burning building. You
Yeah.
know, it all harkens back to that fight or flight response. And we always forget that we get to choose whether we fight or flee.
Yeah.
And in your situation, when you run into a burning building, you're choosing to fight. You're channeling that into, your job and to rescue or put out that fire instead of running away, which, could be the more quote unquote logical response. But oftentimes it's that mental choice. And when you
Mm.
become more informed about your natural stress response, it's easier to overcome. I'm sure you had many, firefighter mentors who helped you in that process of being
Yeah.
able to just run into the building instead of becoming so nervous that you couldn't do it.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily in the times that we were actually running into burning buildings. It was more or less like we did a lot of training within, because we had things called our SCBAs, which was our self-contained breathing apparatus, so those masks that we put on our faces
Yeah.
to go into burning buildings. There was a lot of training within that and, monitoring our breathing and making sure we're not hyperventilating and overly breathing, like panic breathing. We had training on skip breathing, which would help regulate our systems to if like we got entrapped in a building and we needed to really be monitoring how much air we're intaking. So it was more or less of training of not freaking out when you're in crazy situations. Like we also had things called, oh gosh, I forget what they're called, Marcus, but with our breathing apparatus, we would put them on like backpacks, and our bottles were on our backs, and we would have helmets, and we would have like our radios on our front of our turnouts, which are our fire gear. And there was so many things that we can get caught on. So if we're in a burning building and something within our whole gear gets caught on a wire, we don't freak out in situations like that. So we had a lot of different instances where we were training within going in, gosh, it was probably about 20 feet of just like a crazy amount of wires that they're attaching from one end of the box to another end of the box. And we're in one of our trainings, and then I'll give the mic back to you, Marcus. But when we crawl through this tunnel of wires, and of course, you get
caught every small inch that you're moving forward. And part of our training was to not freak out and just figure out where upon yourself, your body, the wires are being caught. So there was a lot of the mental aspect of knowing that you're okay and knowing that you could figure things out and um moving forward in those crazy times and not freaking out. So
Yeah, you
yeah.
hit on such a valuable point that I
Hmm.
bring up in all of my trainings. I talk about it extensively in the book. When you boil down what you just talked about, you're really just talking about practice.
Ah, yeah.
You wouldn't run into a burning building for the very first time without having any of that training, any of that practice,
Mm,
because you're building that muscle memory. You're showing yourself that you can be calm in those situations. And the same thing goes for speaking. So many people
mm,
are very familiar with the practice aspect of so many other activities. Firefighting, playing basketball, going to the gym. You train your body and your mind for those activities. But rarely do we talk about practicing speaking, but it's
yeah.
just as valuable. You will have half as much anxiety if you practice a speech 10 times as if you practice it 0 times. And
Mm,
the same goes for small interactions. I really tell people that the first step in really an active way is to start going out and having small practice conversations, whether that's with the cashier at the grocery store by your house or the barista down at the coffee shop. Those small interactions can help you build up your mental and speaking chops. So the next time you have, a quote unquote important conversation, you have the skills necessary and you have the mental, you know, uh, backing to go into those situations in a more confident way, the
mm,
same way that you practiced those stressful situations before you ran into the burning building. It's the exact same idea, but rarely do people think, oh, I should go practice speaking. But I
yeah.
think that that's the most important thing that we should do.
I have that, and then taking those small conversations, like you were saying, like going into a coffee shop, if you're out there listening, yes, firefighting is a major extreme, but if you're just dealing with a little bit of anxiety, being around people, being able to start small and practice those small things, just like Marcus was saying, um, and being able to build up and having that foundation of practice behind you. I love to talk about that as well. Especially when you relate that to confidence, because, social anxiety has everything to do with building of your own confidence to know that you're going to be okay in certain situations. So I loved that, Marcus.
Yeah, absolutely. So many people think that confidence is this thing that you're either born with or you're not. And that's
Yeah.
really not the case. I was a very unconfident child, and I still have some unconfident tendencies that
Mhm.
I need to continue to work on throughout my life. But confidence is really defined when you start to overcome that social anxiety. You show yourself that you have the confidence within you through those practice conversations. When you
Yeah.
really nail something and you've got a conversation that just seems to be flowing naturally, that tells your brain, "Hey, you're actually pretty good at this." And it releases those feel good hormones that give you a positive association. Too
Yeah.
often, we only have negative associations with speaking, especially public speaking.
Mm.
But I have seen with many of the people I have helped overcome their anxiety, after we have one good interaction, one presentation where they get up and they just nail it, those feelings are so positive that they wanna do it again. It's like
Yeah.
when if you like roller coasters or other frightening activities that give you that same adrenaline rush, you wanna do it again. And once you start to build up those positive associations with speaking, instead of only having negative associations, now your confidence begins to skyrocket because you've got all of that experience behind you and all of those positive feelings associated with it.
Mm, I love that, Marcus. And something that just came up when you were talking was social audio. Because I was pretty big on Clubhouse when it first came out, and there's a couple other social audio platforms within LinkedIn and Twitter Spaces. And that was a space, if we kind of relate this to entrepreneurship, um, that's where I really started to understand the power of speaking and the practice of speaking and the confidence within my own knowledge to not have to have a script every time I talked. Have you ever been on social audio platforms by any chance?
I'm not huge into social media.
Mm.
I got off it several years ago,
Ah,
um, but I am familiar with social audio, and I've seen it. I haven't participated, but I think it can be a valuable resource as long as you use it in a positive way. Just
mm,
like all tools, social media is just another tool and you can use it positively or negatively. So,
yeah,
depending on, what sort of mental association you have with it, I think it
yeah.
could be a really positive way to get out and to start having those conversations.
I love that. Because LinkedIn, just because I know you're bigger over on LinkedIn, is that
Yep.
a platform that you do use, correct?
Yeah, and the reason I do that is it seems to be, strictly business focused. There's
Yeah,
less kind of, hey, these are all of the great things that I'm doing in every aspect of my life, and you start to
yeah.
put on a performance that might be detrimental to your own mental health. Not saying that that's the case for everybody, but a lot of times it can be discouraging when you see other people living this filtered lifestyle that you wish you had, when in all actuality they also go through the same ups and downs. And then
Mm,
you don't have to feel like you need to perform either. I feel like LinkedIn, there's a little bit less of that. You don't have to post as frequently, and it's a bit more positive leaning. Most of the comments are very positive. Most of the people on there, I believe, are wanting to see others succeed.
mhm.
So that is one of the few platforms that I am on actively.
No, I completely agree with you. I'm just, starting to grow on LinkedIn just because I have a business in a specific location, and I was told that LinkedIn is a great way to network and find people to employ from that platform. So completely agree with you. It's more of like a business networking platform, or at least it's really helped me in that aspect as well. So, um, and yeah, I completely agree with you of social media can bring out a lot of negative mental I don't want to say associations, but just feelings, I guess. And LinkedIn is definitely not like that, so I completely agree with you. And I'm kind of looking over to go on to LinkedIn Spaces a little bit because I was on Clubhouse, but you're right. It was a very clicky platform, but it did. I used it for a better way for me to grow as an entrepreneur and understand that my stories and my words were very impactful. I when I first got on social media, it was only a couple years ago, and I wanted to help empower women within business because I had been through so much as a firefighter, especially being a woman. I wanted to help inspire women to do whatever the heck they wanted within business. And the business mentor that I had hired was, um, yeah, not the best, for my mindset, because she kind of just, like, brushed me off because she had, was running through a million people, so it was an interesting process for me to understand, and when I found social audio, I was like, "Oh, got it." So, um, that was a little bit of a rant, Marcus, but, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to what are you using the tool for? It
Yeah.
sounds like you were using it in a very positive way. You had a clear direction, you had goals and objectives that you wanted to meet, and you weren't letting it consume you or define how you saw success.
Mm,
So, being able to have those clearly defined uses for the tool, I think is important. And it becomes detrimental when you start comparing yourself to other people on those platforms. It becomes detrimental when you start overusing them or using them as an escape, which I
Mm,
often did. You
mm,
just end up scrolling for hours, kind of in the digital world, and you ignore the issues in the real world.
mm,
Um, but it sounds like you had the right mentality going into it, which is what I recommend to people. Obviously, I'm a unique case, being someone who kind of stopped being on
yeah.
social media. The accounts are kind of still out there in the ether. Facebook has its use cases. If there's an
Mhm,
event, a birthday party, or something that someone invites me to, that's a great way to be notified and to see who's going and times and locations. But I didn't see the benefit for my own mental health in, being actively a part of those platforms.
I love that, Marcus, and to have the awareness that it wasn't the best for you is huge. Um, so to kind of direct this back towards your book, and the growing of I guess the awareness of your ability to overcome social anxiety. Um, eh, what is because I practice is one of them. We touched on that. What would be another tool that you talk about in your book that would be beneficial for someone that is trying to get over social anxiety?
Yeah. So I talk about it quite often about, what is the first step? And
Mhm.
practice is one of those things that is along the way the whole time. You need to practice every single aspect of speaking.
Yeah.
But the very first step that anyone can take right now, even if you don't read the book, even if you're just listening, is to change how you identify yourself. I found that a lot of my anxiety came from my own self identity. I identified as an introvert. And this could also be if you identify as an extrovert. I think they can both have negative connotations that lead you to fulfill those roles that you've been identified as. But I would identify myself as an introvert. I would
Mm,
identify myself as an unconfident speaker, as a poor speaker, as someone who just wasn't, good at talking. But by doing so, I then reinforce those behaviors in myself. So
mm,
James Clear, an author that I really like, wrote this book called Atomic Habits, and he talks
mm,
about identity-based habits. And I think that it had also an extra meaning when it comes to overcoming certain, you know, bad habits that you have, which one of them might be not practicing speaking or thinking that you're a bad speaker. So the first thing you can do is actually just change how you identify yourself. So instead of saying, I can't give that speech because I'm not a confident speaker, you could say, I am a confident speaker, so I don't have to be nervous. And by
mm,
doing so, you're manifesting that positive energy, manifesting that confidence in yourself, because it all begins on how you identify yourself. I believe we've all been in a situation where someone else, a stranger, a family member, a friend, tells you, "Hey, you're really good at this thing." And now all of a sudden, you really believe that. And you actually
yeah.
maybe even get better at doing that thing because you've been identified as someone who's good at that. And the same works if you identify yourself as being good at that action. So when you identify as a confident speaker, you then are well on your way to overcoming anxiety because you don't have that mental barrier blocking you every time you try and get better that says you're bad at this, you're not a confident speaker, you're an introvert. You don't have that barrier anymore. You allow yourself
Mm.
the freedom to not fit into those labels.
Ooh, yeah, that goes to a quote, gosh, I'm gonna butcher it. So it's just basically, what you think is what you become.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, oh, yeah, who said that?
I don't know, but and it's, more eloquent as well,
Yeah,
but
"You are what you constantly think about," something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, because it's true. I mean, you have the ability to move your um and I just talked about this in another recording or another episode. Um I mean, that's the thing is like just to, I don't want to talk about the same thing again, but I mean, as I'm sitting here staring at my painting, I graduated or I studied art throughout my college degree. Um, and through fire, I kind of like it was kind of wavering of when I would paint and when I would not be able to. And recently I've been, I don't want to say forcing myself to sit down at my easel, but I've been forcing myself because I thought I forgot how to paint. And one of my neighbors was like, "No." I was sitting in the backyard because I live on a bridle trail. So she was riding her horse, and I was sitting there painting on a piece of my pottery. And she goes, "What are you doing, Lauren?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just painting, I do pottery and oil painting." She was like, "No way. I have an art studio in my backyard. You need to come over and check it out." Um, and so I did, and it was absolutely stunning. And she was like, "You need to come over and paint at least once a week." I was like, "Cheryl, I don't know if I could do that. Like, honestly, I don't know if I have the confidence right now to be painting in front of somebody because I just haven't been painting. And it's been years." And she was like, "You'll get it back. Like, trust me, you'll get it back." And it took me about a month to go over there. But it was Cheryl who got me to start painting again. And now I'm sitting here looking at my painting, being like, why didn't I paint for so many years, So has everything to do with your mindset, and what you think is definitely what you become. And now I'm staring at my painting and being like, yeah, I totally still know how to paint. Like,
Yeah, and I think everyone has that within themselves, you know? We are living in a society, unfortunately, that only values people who seem to be good at something in a monetary way,
yeah,
when really you can be good at something completely free. You don't have to
yeah,
sell your paintings, you don't have to be a professional speaker, you don't have to do all of these things for money. You can just be good at something because you love doing it. And if you
yeah,
love doing something, I feel like you're good at it.
yeah. No, I completely agree, Marcus. So that was a good point to make, is that if you are struggling with social anxiety, and you constantly are telling yourself that, that's not going to get out of that slump. That's just going to constantly reiterate having that issue rather than slowly being able to improve on your social anxiety. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a prolific kind of idea well outside of just public speaking. You know, professional athletes get this thing called the yips, which is
Mm,
where they can play the game perfectly well, but they get in their head and they start telling themselves that they can't do it.
huh.
And part of that process to overcome it is to reinforce those feelings that yes, I am a good baseball player or basketball player or whatever, and that begins to allow you to start to focus on those fundamentals again and remember that you are good at this thing. And I
Yeah.
feel like speaking is even easier than that. Everyone knows how to speak. If you put someone in a completely empty room and just had a hidden microphone and told them to talk about whatever they wanted for 5 minutes, I'm sure everyone would be able to do that fluidly.
Yeah.
But the second you put someone else in there or a group of people, now all of a sudden that anxiety sets in because you start to tell yourself that you're not good at it.
Mm,
When your knowledge didn't change, your ability didn't change, only the situation. So
mm.
being able to identify yourself in a positive, confident way goes a long way to having a better outlook on your own speaking and being more confident in the process.
And something that just came up, Marcus, was in college as well, public speaking. Like, I think I don't know the name of the course, but when you have to, it's literally like a speaking course where you have to get in front of your peers and just give speeches. That's the whole concept of the course. Um, Yeah, it must be called public speaking, but that was back when, I didn't have confidence in public speaking. I thought I didn't know enough. But that's the thing is, like, in courses like that, when they give you the title or what you're gonna talk about, it's like, well, first of all, I mean, yes, I could have definitely done some more research and done some more, the practice, right? But when I used to get in front of my class, I remember that class very vividly never was really good at it. I hated getting in front of the class. I never practiced. I had my little note cards. I would just read off the note cards. It was pretty horrendous, but doing what I do now, it's a lot of knowledge of what I used to do. So I love speaking now within the knowledge base that I have. Um, and I'm assuming that listeners out there as well, might have been through public speaking courses. So they might have some ideas of what I'm talking about. But that practice is 100% ideal of really gaining your confidence within that social anxiety aspect.
Yeah, the more you know about the subject, the easier it is to talk about.
Yeah.
And it comes back to that test anxiety. You know,
Mm,
if you go into a test and you're questioning, oh, is that the right fact? Is that the right answer? Now your anxiety is twice as much. But if
yeah.
you've studied, if you know it, and you sit down and you see it and you go, that's the right answer, you've got no anxiety because you know it. You know that that's the correct answer. The same goes for speaking. When you know what you're going to say, when you're going to say it, and you have the freedom to go up there and just say it,
Yeah.
then you don't have that same anxiety. But if you didn't practice and you don't know where you're going and you didn't put some time into the structure of your speech so it flows naturally for you,
Yeah.
then you're going to have a lot more anxiety because you're not only up there speaking, you're also up there
Yeah.
trying to remember everything and you're
Yeah.
trying to get it right. So you're
Yeah.
just adding an additional layer of pressure on yourself that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, just like and it just reminded me of like, well, why didn't I like doing those speeches? And some of them were like on history. I hate history. Like it's not my forte. Like, yes, it's good to know, but at the same time, it's just not my zone of genius. It's just not fun for me to learn. So things like that, it's like, yes, having that knowledge and the practice is 100% a really fabulous way to um, really gain your confidence within that social anxiety aspect for sure. And
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
You also hit on something that I love, which is you had to give presentations on things that you weren't passionate about,
Yeah,
which is very much the case for so many people. I feel like most of the time when we get up to speak in front of others, it's for speech class, it's for a job, it's for
yeah,
something that we're not the most passionate person in the world about.
yeah,
But the way that I get over that and the way I tell people to kind of get over that mental hurdle is okay, you may not be super passionate about this topic, but if you get up there, you give it your all, you do the best job you possibly can, you will
mhm,
be better prepared for the moment when you get to speak on something you're truly passionate about.
mm,
And then it's going to resonate even more. So I now get very excited when I get to speak on something I'm not super passionate about because I
yeah,
know that it's going to allow me the opportunity to practice in a situation that's not as stressful to me. When you
mm,
speak about something you're not as passionate about, you're not invested emotionally in that subject. So it's a
yeah,
little bit easier actually. So when you give those practice speeches about things you're not 100% passionate about, it gives you that practice needed to be truly amazing during the speech or the conversation that you really want to succeed at.
mm,
Without that, you're going to be 10 times as nervous during that important, quote unquote,
yeah.
interaction if you didn't have all those practice speeches under your belt.
I love that, Marcus. It just goes right back to that practice, right? And it's the way you think about things. I was super young back then, but I mean, this kind of focus of that practice and um and having that knowledge base behind you, it's an interesting topic because I also love Brene Brown. Do you know her?
I'm not familiar. What is she an author?
She talks about she's an author and a speaker as well. She talks about gosh, what is her main topics? She is definitely a motivational speaker and she talks to entrepreneurs and um gosh, and I'm just looking her up to see what she is. Well, it's mostly on gratitude and not 100%. We'll forget about that, what she exactly talks about. But I absolutely love the way she talks. And she talks about kind of the anxiety aspect of as well of making decisions and and really trusting your intuition and gut to like knowing that you know the answer. And she gives these big speeches, and she's a TEDx speaker as well. And one of the things that she does talk about is knowing that you do know the answers to things. And she goes to these big topics, and she actually doesn't have a speech prepared because she has done so much research within her specific field, within anxiety, and it's a very niche topic. And I really wish that I knew the exact word of like vulnerability and there it is shame. Like her main topic is shame. So she's done 10 plus years of university studies and all of this on shame. So when she's going into speeches, she's been doing this for so long that um she kind of goes off of the audience and how they're interacting with her talks. And it's interesting, just to put that at a lower level, right? Or a different level of me coming into a podcast. I never know what I'm going to be talking about. And I go off of my intuition. And I know that's like a different level, Marcus, um, of yes, you could go into speeches prepared. And 100% practicing. But when you get to a certain level of, if you've been doing this for so long and you know the topic that you're speaking on, if you have just main bullet points of your talk, what are your thoughts on, or do you talk about that, or what do you think about intuition and just knowing your topic so well, just to kind of, I don't want to say riff, but yeah, riff on the topics that you do know and the energy around you.
Absolutely. And I think there's different levels. And I would
Mhm.
argue that the reason she can riff so well and doesn't have an outline is
Mhm.
because she's practiced so much that she
Yeah.
doesn't need to practice anymore.
Yeah.
And if you watch her speeches, I haven't watched them, but I would
Yeah.
bet that they follow a similar cadence. And if you took snippets from one speech and another, they
Mhm.
would line up with each other. I do
Mm.
this all the time. I've also been speaking for 10 years, and you start to get this rhythm. And you can
Yeah.
talk about subjects maybe in a different order, but you know them so well that you kind of know what order to go in, even if you never write anything down. So that would be kind of
Mhm.
my rationale behind people who have this ability to almost go up unprompted and give a fantastic speech. It's because they've practiced so much already that they
Mm.
have that knowledge and they have that kind of muscle memory already in tune. So they can just go up and do it.
That makes
But
a
for
lot
a
of sense, Marcus. Got it.
but for a lot of people who just start out,
Yeah.
I really recommend that you put in that time as well, you
Mm.
know? But I love building outlines that are very minimal. My outline method looks completely different from what people learned in school. There's
Mm.
way too much information in those school outlines. Really, you only need small words or phrases to help guide you on where you're going and what to cover
Mm.
because you've already practiced all that information beforehand. So it uses the cognitive association idea to link small words and phrases to larger concepts in the brain, which gives you a structure. When you're nervous, a structure is really important to keep your nerves down,
Yeah.
but it also allows you the freedom to not stick to a hard script that
Oh,
you're
yeah.
reading off of,
Like word
and
by
that
word.
yeah, it detracts from the audience. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
as genuine, and you can begin to get lost. We've probably all been there where we wrote everything out and we got lost fairly quickly.
Yeah.
This outline allows you that freedom to know where you're going, but also not have set mile markers where every single word is accounted for. So
Mm.
it alleviates some of that stress while also giving you kind of exit signs of, oh, this is the next thing I'm going to talk about, which gives you more structure and allows you to kind of bring that stress response down. And I
Mm.
bet you that those speakers who go up and wing it have one of those outlines in their head that they made up on the spot because they've done it so many times.
That makes so much sense, and, like, to bring that back to my college courses, high school, like, I did word by word, and I have a bad memory, so, of course, I would have anxiety of getting in front of class and speaking because I would be like, "What was the next word? I don't know." You know? Like, history, that was the next word, like, who cares if it's word by word? As long as you have those bullet points, that's a phenomenal point, Marcus.
Yeah, and everyone's outline is gonna look different because
Yeah,
the words that you associate with stories and historical facts is gonna be different than the other words that someone else might use.
yeah.
So everyone kind of builds their own, and it's personal to you, so it works even better than a generic outline.
Yeah. No, I love I love that, and it kinda goes to social audio as well. At first, when I would start rooms, I would have to have, like, bullet points of things that I was going to do, and that was, like, kind of the second step of not having everything word for word like I used to go on lives. And then you would go to bullet points. But after the bullet points, you're so used to your topics and kind of the outline of things that you no longer even need those bullet points anymore. So that was kind of that was a timeline for me as well to understand because people always ask me like, how do you just go into these social audio rooms and just speak from intuition or just speak? And I'm like, well, I just know. And that's a good timeline, Marcus, and I absolutely love it. You just definitely taught me something too.
Good, well, I'm glad. I think everyone can do these things intuitively. It's in
Yeah,
your intuition. But
yeah.
hearing it out loud, reading it in my book, it resonates and it reinforces that, oh, yeah, this is a real tool that professional speakers use and I can use it too. And then
Mm,
it makes things so much easier on yourself because then
yeah.
you don't feel like, oh, it's some weird trick that I'm not supposed to use. You can use whatever makes speaking easier. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
And is your book predominantly based around public speaking, or is it for the everyday person who is maybe suffering with social anxiety?
I'm so glad you asked. So it's actually broken down into three sections because I
Okay.
break down all communication into three categories. There's
Hmm.
personal interactions, business interactions, and public interactions.
Ah.
Personal is between you and 1 to 5 people. Those are the
Mm,
normal conversations you have on a daily basis. Business interactions are surrounding your life, your money, or your well-being, where you have to get the best outcome for yourself.
yeah.
Usually that's gonna be talking with your boss during a job interview, negotiating for a car, going
Mm,
to court. Any of those are a business interaction. Something is at stake. The final is public interactions. That's where you are talking to 10 or more people and you are the center of attention. And each one builds on each other. So once you master personal communication, we then move to business. Once you
mm,
master business, we then move to public. And breaking it into small, manageable chunks allows you a lot less anxiety. You don't have to jump from being super socially anxious to speaking in front of 10,000 people. You
mm.
have to learn to communicate to one person before you can communicate to thousands. And that breaks it down into manageable steps, and you can take it at your own pace. If you want to stop at the end of section one and go back and practice and reread items until you feel confident there, then you can move on to the next section.
Where did you get all of your knowledge from? And I know it was a lot of personal experiences, but where did you learn all of your knowledge? Was it self-driven? Did you take courses? Where did you find all of your knowledge from?
Yeah, it is completely self-driven.
Mm,
So I consider myself an autodidact, which is someone who just seeks out new knowledge just for the sake of learning something new.
yeah.
So over my, over 20 years of overcoming social anxiety, I've done a ton
Mm,
of research, looked into a lot of scientific studies and psychological phenomena on why we communicate the way that we do and why we feel that anxiety in the first place. And then there's just years worth of personal experience. I've had the opportunity to work in several different environments where I got to speak to thousands and thousands of people every
Yeah.
single night. And that constant repetition allowed me to view patterns that most people never get to see. And then I break those patterns down in the book and come up with my own psychological phenomena and kind of my own impromptu research over the last 15 years.
Wow.
Um, and that's really where a lot of these things come from is my brute force kind of approach to overcoming social anxiety and just collecting all of that information and boiling it down into the things that worked and the things that didn't work.
Mm. I think that's the most important aspect when I'm looking into a mentor is personal experience. I can't imagine having a mentor that just, learned something and wants to tell somebody something. It's like, well, I really do love the personal endeavors that people go through. It's I mean, because they understand what you're going through, right?
Yeah, I really try to, put in that anecdotal evidence, but
Yeah.
back it up with actual scientific peer-reviewed studies.
Mm.
Because sure, one person may have this experience, but I really wanted to get to the root and see if it was factually correct. And there were a lot of scientific studies from some very well-regarded universities and scientists that backed up a lot of the things that I found.
Wow. I absolutely love that. So not only did you go through it on a personal basis, but you did so much research on it as well. And those research um was just backed on other human studies as well.
Yeah, I think there's over 15 peer-reviewed university studies in the book,
Wow.
to back up all of the different anecdotal evidence and things that I talk about. Because it's one thing to say, "Hey, this worked for me." It's
Mhm.
another to say, "This was scientifically proven to help."
I love it, and I love that the book is, s 3 different main categories because there are different categories of, anxiety, and as we kind of already talked about, the personal and then the business, and what was that last one that I'm forgetting the word for?
Public
Public.
interactions.
Yeah, because those are huge and totally different, and when you hit on business, that's interesting, like, talking about, buying a car, and that's interesting, that conversation you have with a business professional in that way. I mean, they do it every day, and you're going in there to just buy the car, so that's an interesting chapter that, would probably help me as well, so
Yeah, who you are communicating to will define how you speak to them and
yeah.
define the anxious response. Some people are totally fine in personal communication, but
Mhm.
freeze at the slightest mention of public speaking.
Yeah,
Or they've gotten over their personal communication, but now when they talk to their boss, they get really nervous.
yeah.
But when they talk to a coworker, they're totally fine. There's
Mm.
different levels and there's different ways to approach things. And I think understanding the difference will not only allow you to understand why your anxiety changes, but also how to overcome it in those moments.
Mm. I love that, Marcus. Um, Especially right now when the world is just getting back to normal and people are starting to communicate in person again. I think this book is a really important read for everyone to understand where anxiety comes from, how to get those tools to help them to work through that and in different scenarios as well.
Absolutely. I thought it was a very timely release as the pandemic
Yeah.
seems to be slowing down and people are back out and everyone wants to be closer now. I feel like
Yeah.
being isolated for so long, it's time to be closer with other people and to share memories and experiences.
That's interesting, and as you mentioned, Marcus, you were like, "I used to classify myself as an introvert," and I used to as well, and even in the pandemic, like, even I was towards the end of it, I was like, "Okay, this is even enough for me, and I'm an introvert," but at the same time, it's like, that's how I classified myself. I get a lot of my energy restored from when I'm by myself, when I'm painting, all these things, but I also had a mentor tell me as well, "Lauren, maybe you were just around the wrong people as well." So it's an interesting time for that book released as well, Marcus.
Absolutely. Well, this has
Uh,
been an amazing
yeah.
conversation. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah. First, I would love for you to let the listeners know it will be in the show notes, right? Of where to find your book, where to find you, and your website, where people find you. What are all those pieces?
Yep. You can find me on my website, thespeechadvisor.com.
Okay.
You can email me directly through there. You can book me for different events, or if you're looking for a coach or mentor.
Mhm.
The book is available tomorrow, Tuesday, May 3rd, and that's going to be available on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. So, however you
Wow.
like to engage with different books, if you want to hear more of my voice, you can get the audiobook as well.
I love
Uh,
that you're the audio speaker on your book. That's
it'd be a
rad.
bit hypocritical if I wasn't, right? A
Yeah,
book
that's
written
actually
on
true.
speaking if I didn't read it.
That's actually really true, Marcus. Because usually, authors,
You get
well,
somebody
usually
else.
somebody,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's, I mean, it's a book on speaking. So, hello, Lauren. Like,
Don't I had the same thought. I was like, man, that'd be really
that
hypocritical.
would be really weird. I absolutely love it, Marcus. So you could and this is phenomenal timing as well. I mean, I know we pushed back the recording, so I mean, maybe it was for a good reason.
Everything happens for a reason, right?
I truly believe it, Marcus. So I just wanted to say thank you for your time today and for the listeners tuning in. I absolutely love the conversation today, Marcus, and I will be reading some more of your chapters because I think it's because I did get a PDF version. So maybe I just got the insider scoop on that. So thank you so much for all the information. I absolutely love this all, especially within entrepreneurship, because I know a lot of my listeners out there are entrepreneurs, and anxiety and speaking are a huge part of that. And the three aspects of your book are a phenomenal way to to kind of separate those three. So I just wanted to say thank you, Marcus, again for joining us in today. And on that note, I will talk to you soon, lovelies. Thank you for tuning in to Unstoppable Confidence Podcast, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you again, Marcus, for joining in.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I hope you are so excited about where you're going, because I know I'm excited for you. Thank you so much for listening in today. If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with a girlfriend or posted it on social media. Tag me so I could personally say thank you. I am so grateful. And until next time,